All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. It is Holy Grail week in college football, and that is the only sport that matters. I was going to give Joe a nice minute to gloat, but he decides to come on here being an asshole. So, Joe, fuck you, fuck the Mets, and hopefully either the Dodgers or Padres give you a nice little spanking and a 4-0 sweep.
I'll tell you what, Beef. I appreciate you having me on as always. I appreciate you still agreeing to do the show when I came on like this. But very exciting times. I can't believe we actually did it. I'll take the rally towel off because even I think that's a little ridiculous. But this is the big week in college football. I'll talk Mets at a different date. This is the weekend. We've been talking about it since we were doing our preview shows back in June. I think we did our first one. This has been the weekend that we've been focused on. I cannot wait to dive into the slate. I cannot wait to be sitting there Saturday at 3:30 when all the big games really get going. I do kind of wish they had at least one of these games at noon, but it is what it is. I'm not going to complain about it. It's going to be a great Saturday. Let's dive right into the slate.
Yeah, I guess some of the matchups have, they're still the brands, I think, is what kind of makes it great. Some of them have lost a little bit of its luster with, USC having their kind of recent struggles, losing to Minnesota last week. Oklahoma, I think, was all offseason. I was kind of over that this is like an overhyped Oklahoma squad, but that's one of the best rivalries in all of college football, and it's always a pretty crazy game for most parts. So the week I think is still going to deliver, and we even talked about it last week where we said not the greatest week, and look what happens. You have Alabama lose to Vanderbilt, and that pretty much just sums it up. Alabama loses to Vanderbilt. That's college football in 2024 for you in a nutshell. But here we go. We got a big week to attack. We'll look back at last week real quick. I went 10-9-1 last week, 4-2 straight up. 2-3-1 against the spread, 3-3 on the over/under, 0-1 on my dog of the week, and 1-0 on my lock of the week. You were 8-11-1, so you went 2-4 straight up, 3-2-1 against the spread, 2-4 on your over/under, 1-0 on your dog, and 0-1 on your lock of the week to wrap up week 6. We head into week 7 now. I think I included 7 games actually because we have our G5 game of the week, and then we included the Texas game, Penn State game, Tennessee game, Ohio State game, Ole Miss game, and Kansas State game. So we threw in all of the 6 kind of main games of the week, and we gave our G5 game of the week some love as well. And we'll start it off with that G5 game of the week, the 4-1 Toledo Rockets at Buffalo, 3-2. Little Maction here to kick us off this week, Joe. 12 o'clock on ESPNU. Toledo, 9.5-point favorite. Over/under is 44.5. Give me your thoughts on the Rockets this weekend. Our G5 game of the week, I try to show one of the teams that maybe has some playoff shot. We had JMU in here last week, and they lose to your UL Monroe Warhawks. So does that happen again this week?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, that was insane. I know Bama lost to Vandy, Coyle, and you kind of did bring me back down to earth with this. I did text in our group chat, like, the JMU losing to UL Monroe might be the most shocking result of the week. Obviously, I settled down, still Vandy over Bama. But, I mean, it was up there. I was stunned that they lost that game. But I think Toledo wins this game pretty comfortably, 38-14. I think Buffalo just, like, if they hadn't beaten NIU, this would be like a 15, 16-point spread. I think they're still getting a lot of credit for beating an NIU team that, even though they had a bye week going into that game, was coming off the biggest win in program history. It's tough not to, lose a step or lose focus no matter how much you talk about, trying to stay committed to the task at hand. Because then you saw Buffalo go and UConn kick the shit out of them the other weekend. I think Toledo's a really good team. One of the more consistent G5 programs over our lifetime, Coyle. I really hope Toledo doesn't go with NIU to the Mountain West. I saw that was a report with all the crazy realignment stuff. Just want to get that out there really quick. But I just think Toledo's a better team. I haven't watched them this year besides when they kicked, Mississippi State's doors in. I think Toledo's got a real shot here if they win the MAC to at least be in the discussion for that last spot, that last auto bid. But for now, I'll take them to comfortably beat Buffalo.
Yeah, 2 squads that sit at 1-0 here in the MAC early in conference play. Toledo, though, I forget. Sorry, Joe, if you mentioned it, but this is the same Toledo team that did go to and Mississippi State. Probably, I mean, hats off to Vandy. Like it doesn't look like they'll be at the bottom of the SEC this year. It looks like it's probably going to be this Mississippi State team, but still, for a MAC team to go to an SEC team and win 41-17 is super impressive. And I heard you talking about it with like Buffalo, or excuse me, with NIU beating Notre Dame. Buffalo beats that same NIU team. They could have been a little bit over their skis and just played the perfect game that day. So I don't really know what to make of this Buffalo squad. The Rockets can put up points, though. They're averaging a little over 35 points per game, 4-1 record, and they're the favorite to win the MAC right now at plus 230. We said it at the beginning. Or do they have a chance to kind of shit down their leg and pull a JMU from last week? Obviously, that would blow any chance of getting that G5 playoff spot, which is still probably a pretty long shot. But I think it's a game emphasis. Like you have to come out ready to play, and you have to win these games and win them as dominant as you can. I think if you're going to be a team from the MAC getting in the playoffs, so I think that's the emphasis for Toledo in this one, and I have them winning by 2 scores. I go Toledo 31, Buffalo 17, so Toledo minus 9.5, and over 44.5 as our appetizer warm-up game. And now we get into what we've been calling Holy Grail Week here. 6 games, all have playoff implications going forward, rivalry games. Fun one to start us off per usual. Number 1, Texas, sitting there coming off the bye week. They got to watch some teams implode last week, and while they kind of sat there, rested up, and Quinn Ewers is back and will start this week. Longhorns enter this game at number 1 in the country at 5-0. Versus number 18 Oklahoma down at the Cotton Bowl. Oklahoma at 4-1. 3:30 kick on ABC. Texas, a 14-point favorite, over under 51.5. And yeah, Joe, at the beginning you mentioned one of these games being at noon. Hasn't this game always been at noon?
I want to say, I don't know, sir. They said it was the first time it was at 3:30. I don't know about ever, because obviously that's a lot of time, but in a very long time, because I know this is usually the noon game that gets us started for the weekend. But I'm surprised this game is at 3:30, and I get it. SEC on ABC, they wanted this to be the 3:30 slot. But if you look, we're going to get in all the other games in a little bit. So many of these games are at 3:30, 7:30. If this game was at noon, you could have gotten much more viewership on this game. This could have been a standalone game, but it is what it is. 3:30 is still going to be great. I'm going Texas 45, Oklahoma 35. So I'll have OU covering the spread, and I'm going to go over 51.5. I feel like you always just got to take the over in this game because this is always a crazy game, always a shootout. Ewers coming back is huge for Texas. Oklahoma, we've seen that they haven't been great this year. Even with a 4-1 record, they haven't really wowed. They struggled offensively against Tennessee. They survived against Auburn, but I wouldn't call that, a domination. That being said, Texas has kind of cruised even without Quinn Ewers. Arch Manning has been great as a backup. But this is one of those games, Coyle, like you always say, crazy stuff happens. That's why I won't take Texas to cover. I'll probably stay away from the spread during the game on Saturday and just take the over. But I think Texas wins this game as comfortable as the Red River rivalry can get. I know there one year, I think was it Oklahoma beat Texas or the other way around a couple years ago, like 49-0?
Yeah, it was Texas won 49-0.
Yeah. I don't think
title game? Or no, that was the regular season.
Yeah, it was a regular season game, but I don't think we're getting that. I think we're going to get a pretty good game because this is your biggest game of the season for both of these teams. Well, maybe not Texas now with A&M at the end of the year, but give me Texas here. I think it's going to be a pretty good game. Weird game as always, so I like OU to cover.
Yeah, you summed it up best, where it's just always chaos in this one. 9 of the last 11 meetings between these two schools have been decided by 8 or fewer points. You have that 49-0 game in 2022, and then Oklahoma won the Big 12 title game. That's the one I got mixed up with back in 2018, 39-27. But every other game has been decided over those last 11 by 8 or less points. Last year, Oklahoma got the win, though. I remember watching that after the homecoming tailgate last year, soaking wet and coming home and watching that game. And that was one of the more exciting games of the college football season last year. Ended Texas's chance at having an undefeated season. Texas was, I think, almost a touchdown favorite, if not more, going into that one. The main thing, and I kind of went back and looked at the box score from that game last year, and I remember watching it live too. Dylan Gabriel gave that Texas defense a lot of fits with his legs. He rushed for 113 yards in that game last year, and new Sooners quarterback Michael Hawkins, he's an athlete. He can run. He ran for 69 yards and a touchdown in his first start at Auburn. So I think that's something to keep an eye on if they're able to kind of go back and look what they did last year, whether it was just scrambles or design runs. Hawkins could be an asset in this one, especially with Oklahoma down a bunch of receivers still. Burks, their big-time transfer receiver, their leading receiver, is out in this one they announced earlier today. But with Texas coming off the bye, and they had 2 weeks basically of layup games between UL Monroe and Mississippi State with Arch starting, Quinn Ewers hasn't played football in almost a month. So I think that's something to keep an eye on if he comes out slow, rusty potentially. My angle on this game for betting is I'm going to bet on Oklahoma early. I'm going to take them plus 3.5 in the first quarter and plus 7.5 in the first half. I think that they can come out, surprise Texas a little bit. Both teams coming off a bye, so I think you could see some trickeration. I do think Quinn Ewers could come out starting slow with a little bit of rust. So I'm going to go Oklahoma first quarter and Oklahoma halftime spread to make things interesting. But I do think Texas winds up kind of imposing their will, and they're a much better roster, and I think a much better coaching staff as well over the course of the second half. So maybe even look to get in on Texas live. For the sake of our picks, I'll take Texas to cover the number, but I don't love that pick. 14 points in a rivalry game like this is a lot. But I will go Texas 35, Oklahoma 20. So Texas minus 14, the over a 51.5 hit in there. But I do think Oklahoma puts up a pretty good fight in the first half, or at least the first quarter, to make it interesting enough and cover that number. All right, we head out to the first time that these two schools are meeting in Big Ten play. Number 4, Penn State at 5-0, traveling out to LA to play the 3-2 USC Trojans. 3:30 kick on on CBS. It's a weird CBS 3:30 game right there. But Penn State 5.5-point favorites, over under 47.5 out in LA. Do you think the Nittany Lions, Joe, remain undefeated? And unless the Oregon versus Ohio State game is an absolute classic and Penn State escapes this one by the skin of their teeth, they're probably going to be at least the number 3 team in the country entering next weekend.
I have Penn State losing this game, Coyle. Look at what USC 21, Penn State 18. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I know USC, defensively, at least up front, shout out beef up front, hasn't, they're not great. They're pretty light. Some would say late in the loafers. I wouldn't go that far. They are pretty light, though, weight-wise. I think, they've been getting pushed around a lot this year. But the one thing with the Big Ten, and I know this might be a sucker stat, but it's been very evident. Teams that are going 2+ time zones struggle so far in the Big Ten. USC went to Minnesota, lost outright. I think it's the teams are 1-7 straight up. And that being said, USC is in desperation, gotta have it mode. You've had 2 tough losses, a game against Michigan that really you could, both those games very well could have won. If you want to stay alive in the playoff hunt, you have to win this game. Penn State, kind of like I was already saying, you're going to LA, you're going across the country in this game to an environment where the fans, USC fans aren't, great consistently year round, but I have a feeling they're going to show up for this game. This is going to be a really tough environment. Even though I think Penn State is a much better team, this just has James Franklin, kind of tough loss when you really could use a win. Because I think they'll beat Michigan this year, Penn State. I don't think they'll beat Ohio State later in the year, even though that game is in Happy Valley. I think this is going to be a really tough game. I think USC is going to find a way. Kind of like how I've been saying a couple times this year, Penn State, better team, will probably outgain and outplay them, but USC is just going to somehow find a way to win this game. It's got a weird feeling.
I read this in an article this week. It's from thelines.com. It's a college football, it's a betting website, but they release this article every week. I was just shocked to even read this, but first regular season game for Penn State outside the Eastern or Central time zone since 2014 when they played in Dublin. But then it says again, first regular season game outside Eastern time zone / Central time zone since 1992 at BYU. I guess they meant maybe
an American game.
Yeah, probably. An American game, but still, that's wild.
That's insane.
That's what, 30 over 30 years? It's 33 years.
32 years ago, because you said 92 or 91?
Yeah, 92. So
Yeah,
yeah,
32 years ago. You and I were not even thought about yet.
No, yeah, I don't think my parents weren't even married yet.
My parents
That's
got
wild.
married in 92, so yeah, that's
It's
insane.
just wild to even fathom that's a possibility. 'Cause I remember like a couple years ago they played at Auburn, but I mean I guess that's still Central
Yeah,
technically, or is that even Eastern? Who cares? Um,
we're not a time zone podcast.
yeah, but that's just wild to me. I do think though it is harder to come west to east and play like if it was USC coming to Penn State and playing a big noon kickoff 9 a.m. game for USC rather than Penn State going out west. But it'll be interesting. The first of these two now in the new conference meeting up against each other. But I love Penn State in this spot. I think the beef up front matters, and I think Penn State is better equipped to push USC around at the line of scrimmage. This is one of those games that I had highlighted that would be like a rude awakening for USC coming in the Big Ten because they were built like a track squad out there playing in the Pac-12. Now you got to play with the big boys in the trenches, and that roster just isn't there yet. And that's really why I loved LSU over them week one. I thought LSU would have been able to kind of handle them at the line. And then it was like, all right, maybe USC does have something a little bit up their sleeves. But then Michigan's pushed them around, Minnesota's pushed them around, and I think Penn State is more talented than both of those squads. So I think it's a really good spot for Penn State. And James Franklin has done really good in these spots. 21, 12, and 1 as an away favorite against the spread during James Franklin's time at Penn State. Fits that trend here. And Lincoln Riley really struggled in this spot. 2-6 against the spread at USC, coming off a straight up loss. 5-9, including his time at Oklahoma. I think it's a game where track meet style play isn't gonna fly. And Penn State, if they get into that kind of game, they can. But I think they're going to kind of just want to dominate at the line of scrimmage and impose their will with that really good running game. So I think they run it down USC's throat, and I think they win this game pretty comfortably. I'm going to go Penn State 30, USC 23. So Penn State minus 5.5 over 47.5. That touchdown late kind of makes it a closer game than it actually was on the scoreboard by USC. All right, we go down to Knoxville now, another team that was on got a major upset last week, or was the victim of a major upset as they lose to Arkansas as a 2-touchdown favorite. This week they have revenge on their mind in a rivalry game with a 3-2 Florida squad after that big UCF win last week, going to Knoxville to play the number 8 ranked Volunteers, who are 4-1. 7:00 kick on ESPN. Tennessee, a 14.5-point favorite. Over under is 56. Joe, do you like the Vols to bounce back this week?
Coyle, I wrote down, usually on our breakdown sheets, we write the score, what we think is going to cover. Sometimes I'll write a little blurb. I just put Vols big. I'm taking the spread, and I'm taking the over. I didn't even give a prediction. They could win this game by 60 points. I think Tennessee is just a much better team. They have that's a bad loss against Arkansas, who might be better than we think, but still, that's just a really tough loss. You had a chance to really kind of take a grip on a top 4, top 3 spot heading into this week. You have Bama come to town next week or the week after.
Next week.
And it is next week? Okay, because I knew they played them next, but I forget. Yeah, it's Bama bye week, then we go. But I just think Tennessee is going to smash Florida. Good win for Florida against UCF. Called it. Was a sucker play, but I still called it. I just think Florida is outclassed, and I think the Gators will still, with their schedule, be lucky to even sniff a bowl game. So I'm going to go with Tennessee big.
Yeah, I forgot our dogs and our locks off the top of my head. I had South Carolina plus 9.5 as a dog. That was a big loser. You had Florida plus 2.5. That was an outright win. My lock was Boston College UVA under of 53. I think that was played in the 40s, and that was my prediction. So that was a winner. You had Duke plus 9.5. I think they wound up losing by 10.
I for the show I had 9.5. I got them at 10, so I pushed in real life. But yeah, a brutal because they were covering pretty late for Georgia Tech scored. I didn't have the game on. I was following along my phone, but tough. I thought I had that one in the bag. I put my phone down. I'm like, fuck. But what are you gonna do? Life in the fast lane.
I'm right there with you with this Tennessee game, though. I think we have a rout in Knoxville rivalry game from last year. that Florida got the upper hand. I think Tennessee comes out in this one. Bad taste in their mouth from last week. I think Heupel gets back to his old ways and unleashes the offense. All off season, he was talking about like Tennessee. When you think of us, I want you to think of a defensive program, the history, blah blah blah. Like no, Heupel, like you can have a good defense. You're going to need to have a great defense to achieve national championships. But you're an offensive coach. You're an offensive play caller, an offensive coach that draws up plays and systems that average 40, 50 points a game, that puts up over 50 points on Alabama and Nick Saban 2 years ago. Don't get too cute, too conservative. Unleash your awesome quarterback in Nico, all your playmakers, all the speed you have, and just let loose and let the defense make the key plays when it matters if it does get into a shootout. Don't get too cute. Put your foot on the gas and go out there and dominate. And I think that they kind of get back to their old ways and do that this week. I think they blow out this really bad Florida team. And they get moving back in the right direction before Alabama. I'm going to go Tennessee 42, Florida 17, Tennessee minus 14.5, and the over 56. I think this one is over by halftime. And Billy Napier saved his job maybe last week, but if he gets routed and embarrassed in a rivalry game this week, he's right back on to does he have a job by Sunday or Monday morning? All right, probably the game of the night. I'm actually looking forward to our second to last game that we'll be breaking down, but this is still an awesome one. And when you were talking at the beginning, one of the 10 games that we highlighted in the offseason as one of the top 10 games of the season. That's number 2, Ohio State at 5-0, traveling out to Eugene to play number 3, Oregon, who also is 5-0. First time these two teams are meeting in the Big Ten, 7:30 kick on NBC and Peacock. Ohio State is a 4-point favorite, over under 52.5. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Joe?
I have Oregon winning this game 32-28. I'm kind of just sticking with my guns. I thought all offseason looking at this game, early, before this, right before the season started, right in the preseason, I had Oregon over Ohio State. I think when we did our playoff predictions, I had Ohio State losing this game, but then I think they're going to win the rematch in Indianapolis at the end of the season. I'm still sticking with that. I'm going Oregon tight. Love the Ducks to cover the 4 points. Even if Ohio State does end up winning, I think it'll be tough for them to win by more than a touchdown, or at least keep within that margin. I really don't like a total here. I'm going with the over just because I don't know. I just feel like this game could get weird. You can get a defensive score late. But I think Dylan Gabriel, although, listen, neither one of these teams, like you can make a very good argument that the toughest game either one of these teams played was Oregon hosting Boise State.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of that, Ohio State only had one true road game against Sparty. They smashed Iowa, Marshall, Akron, and Western Michigan. Oregon at least played a rivalry game. I know Oregon State's not that great, but they still, handled themselves pretty well. I think Oregon's kind of finding their stride. Ohio State has been great, but they haven't really been tested. I know you can make the exact argument I'm making, but against me. But I'm just kind of going with this. I think Oregon's going to win a close game. I think they'll make a couple of stops, especially with the crowd this juiced. Maybe the biggest Oregon home game, I don't want to say ever, because probably back in the day with those like Matt Leinart USC teams, those are probably massive games too. But definitely the biggest Oregon game in a couple of years at home. Getting Ohio State, getting, you're the primetime national game. I'm going to go with the Ducks here close. I think this is going to be an awesome game. I pray the college football continues to deliver with their big games, because this is a game we, as a college football fan base, deserves for it to be a good game.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Hopefully, it's an awesome 7:30 window. Even at 7, I like to watch Tennessee when they let loose and let them have fun. But that at 7, you got Ohio State, Oregon at 7:30, and then Ole Miss, LSU at 7:30 as well. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Defense travels, and that is why I'm leaning the Buckeyes. I don't think Dylan Gabriel has played all that well, and this is by far the best defense he has played and probably will play all year. He struggles to make big-time throws, and he's had some pretty egregious turnovers, and I just simply don't have the faith in him to make big-time plays that he's going to need to in a close, tight game like this against an OSU defense that is loaded with NFL talent. He had 2 really bad interceptions last week against Michigan State, and just some plays where he thinks he has the arm and the arm strength to fit the ball in tight windows or get it across the opposite hash, and he just doesn't have that arm power, that zip. And when you do that against Michigan State and you're turning the ball over, imagine what kind of the closing speed of these Ohio State defenders are going to be able to do. And I think that's why you kind of saw Dylan Gabriel start his career at UCF in the American Conference. Then he goes to Oklahoma. Sure, he has a nice couple years, but do they really achieve much? Last year, they only went. Was it last year that they only? Or no, the year before they only went 7-6. But still, he's been a product of a system, I think, more than not. Like his completion percentage right now is pretty insane, but look at all the throws he makes. It's all kind of short, gimmicky stuff. And that's a great, college quarterback. But I think there is a ceiling to him, and that limits the overall ceiling of the Oregon Ducks in my eyes. Going on the road is certainly the biggest hurdle in this one, especially winning at a daunting environment like Oregon. That's probably one of the top 5 to 10 environments in all of college football. But if you have the best player on the field in Jeremiah Smith, arguably, you have the better overall defense, maybe the best defense in the country, and a really strong running game, that gives yourself a shot. Will Howard just has to go out there, I think, and play mistake-free football, which easier said than done. But you have the best receiver arguably in the country in Jeremiah Smith that can turn the game upside down on its head in one play and take the ball 75 yards to the house. I just think Ohio State is better at every single position. And head coach, this is a prove it game for Dan Lanning and Ryan Day. Like, can Ryan Day win the big one? Can Dan Lanning win the big one? He's fallen flat on his face against some big opponents like Washington the past couple of years. The first year against Kirby and Georgia, he got absolutely blown out. So big game, I think, for both teams, puts themselves kind of in the driver's seat and lifts a lot of pressure off their shoulder for the rest of the year, because the way that Penn State's looking, Penn State might find themselves in the Big Ten title, and one of these two teams are vying for the spot, and it's most likely going to go to the team that wins this game. So huge game, but I like the rushing offense of Ohio State, and the defense, I think, travels, and I'm going to take Dylan Gabriel to make a couple dumb mistakes to cost the Ducks. So I'm going to go Ohio State 28, Oregon 20, Ohio State -4 and under 52.5. And I would say if you think Ohio State's going to win, I think the under's the play. I think if you like Oregon, take the over. So kind of my logic of Ohio State winning, I got the under. You're rolling with Oregon in the over. I think that's kind of the way to look at this game and the outcome of kind of how those two teams would win. All right, this is a game I'm most excited for. I think it's going to be a track meet. I vividly remember watching this game last year, and I was just like, you were drinking a beer, you gave your empty bottle to the bartender, and by the time you got it and looked back up, they were in the red zone or scoring another touchdown. It was an awesome, one of the more exhilarating games of offensive football last year. But LSU, number 9 in the country, or excuse me, Ole Miss, number 9 in the country at 5-1, at number 13 LSU, who is 4-1, 7:30 on ABC. Ole Miss, I was really surprised to see this, but a 3.5-point favorite over under 61.5. Joe.
Love LSU as a home dog in this spot. LSU at night, it always gets talked about, but it is true. It is a different animal. This is going to be a lot of fun. I have LSU winning this game 44-41, loving the over, loving LSU to cover. And even if they don't win the game outright, I still love the +3.5. I think it's going to be a really tight game. LSU, we haven't really talked about them a lot since their loss to USC, but I mean, Brian Kelly getting a spot like this at home, I've seen him do it a lot at Notre Dame, against these massive games. Ole Miss top 10 team coming to town. He will have the Tigers ready. I think they will find a way to win. So give me LSU here in a barn burner game, which I think is going to be awesome. Like one of those games you're going to have two TVs are going to be going back and forth between, Ole Miss, LSU, and Ohio State, Oregon.
Yeah, last year, the 55-49 thriller I talked about. I think we get another track meet here. LSU, though, sitting at 4-1, hasn't really got discussed at all. Like, for such a big program, I feel like they are kind of just been an afterthought at this point of the season, but also have not beat anyone yet. On the other hand, though, you could say the same thing about Ole Miss. Both these teams' best wins, I think we can agree, are South Carolina. But I think the loser of this game is a serious uphill climb to make the playoff. I think as of right now, Ole Miss is -120 to make it. LSU's +220. So obviously, with Ole Miss being favored here, it gives them an advantage on the odds to make the playoff. But I think if you like LSU to win this game, I think they're worth a sprinkle at +220 to make the playoff, because their toughest game the rest of the way, I believe, is Alabama, and that game is in Baton Rouge. So if you think LSU is going to win this game, maybe even look to double bet that and take LSU plus a 3.5 or the money line, and then maybe even plus 220 to make the playoffs. I think could be in the cards there. but I was very surprised to see Ole Miss favored here in a night game nonetheless in Baton Rouge. I feel like that never happens. ESPN FPI gives Ole Miss a 68% chance to win this one, though. And with it being a 3.5 point spread in favor of Ole Miss, I feel like that's Vegas screaming and begging everyone out there to take LSU. It could be a really kind of square play. Haven't looked at the numbers yet on the betting splits, but I'd be interested to see how much of the money and how much of the bets are on LSU right now, because I feel like it would definitely be a majority. But Lane Kiffin, Joe, has been awesome in these type of spots, in these moments. 8-2-2 against the spread as an away favorite since he got to Ole Miss. So he has been great in this spot. I looked at LSU's numbers as a home dog going back to 2010, though. They're 10-5-1 against the spread as a home dog. So they've been pretty good in this spot as well. But like I said, with Ole Miss being favored by 3.5, I think that kind of screams that this is their game to lose, and Vegas likes them as well. But for the sake of our picks, I'm just going to split the difference. I'll take Ole Miss to win it, but LSU to cover the 3.5. But my play in this one's going to be the over. I bet it at 64 earlier in the week. It's gone down to 61.5, so I don't really love to see that, but I think this is one that could get into the 70s or 80s. I'll go Ole Miss at 37, LSU 34, so plus 3.5 for LSU and over 61.5. And final game of the week, we go out to Boulder. Big 12 game between two 4-1 squads. Hat tip to Colorado for starting out 4-1. I did not expect them to maybe even get 4 wins on the season. Maybe just be like a 4-8 team, 3-9 team. But number 18, K-State, travels to Boulder for a 10:15 kick on ESPN in the Big 12. K-State 3.5, over under 56.5. This line was like 6.5 when it came out, and I was like, I know money's going to come in on Colorado. Let that line go down a little bit and give me some more room. But I'm definitely going to be taking K-State here at 3.5 to spoil my pick. But you on the same side, Joe?
I have Colorado covering by the hook, but I do think Kansas State is going to win this game 27-24. Colorado definitely better than I thought. Coyle, we kind of talked about in the offseason, we didn't know how good they were going to be. Then they came out against North Dakota State, who, good FCS school, but, they survived against, North Dakota State rather than, won in a relatively convincing fashion. It kind of just seemed to be the same old story. Defense stunk. They were doing, Shador had to do a lot. Travis Hunter had to do a lot. And if those two show up, yeah, they'll probably still get a couple more wins. However, Kansas State is one of the best teams in the Big 12. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Colorado starts doing against the top flight competition in the conference. Because I'll admit, I thought UCF was going to be a lot better of a team. But now after back-to-back losses and, even though Florida's not great, but even in that loss, UCF didn't look very competitive. So we'll really kind of this week will tell me a lot about this Colorado team. If they hang in and keep it close with Kansas State, like I think they will, I will definitely kind of view them as I'm not going to say a contender, but definitely a bowl team going forward. I think it's going to be really close. But once again, it's going to be. I think Shador is going to probably get sacked like 5 or 6 times. The O line is going to, definitely a step up in class. I think Colorado will keep it close just because of the fact that they're at home. But I think Kansas State still finds a way to win. I like the under in this game, 56.5.
Yeah, my main kind of point on this game, and it's what I talked about at the very beginning, was just like it's still Colorado to the point where like they're gonna get money coming in on them, and I think Vegas knew that too. Like we're going to start hammering Colorado, especially seeing them 4-1, and they win this game, they're going to be ranked, and everyone's back on them. But I just feel like they're the most publicly bet team every single week. And hat tip to them for the way that they've played the past couple weeks. They've played really well, a couple impressive wins. But I mean, also a few weeks ago, they needed a Hail Mary to beat Baylor at home, who is a terrible team. Like the wheels could fall off at any moment for this team. And I do think at the line of scrimmage, that's where Kansas State is at their best. That is where Colorado is at their worst. And I'll go back to this as well, since Chris Kleiman has taken over at Colorado at Kansas State in 2019, the second best team in the country against the spread, 41, 24, and 3, covering at a 63% clip. I think this number could even go down to maybe 3. I might wait to see that. But this could be a big, big play for me, depending on how Saturday goes. We'll see what it is by the end of the night. But this could be one of those games where you don't really remember putting a lot of coin on it, and you wake up and your DraftKings is loaded up for NFL Sunday. But I love Kansas State in the spot. I think that they win this one pretty comfortably. I'll go 30-23. K-State minus 3.5, under 56.5. I think kind of like I said with the USC and Penn State game, that Shador looking to pad his stats maybe at the end, gets a garbage touchdown to Travis Hunter late. But I don't think this game's ever in doubt. I think Kansas State goes on the road here and wins and kind of avenge themselves, excuse me, from that BYU loss a couple weeks ago. All right, final two picks of the day, our dog of the day and our lock of the week. We'll start off with the dog of the day. I'm going to go with Virginia, plus 7.5. This team is stingy. I bet on them a couple times now. Outright underdog win over Boston College last week. This was projected to be one of the worst teams in the country. I think their over-under win total was like 3.5 or 4.5. This is a team I think is going to go bowling, and I think that they're a live dog in this game against Louisville. SMU, I nailed that bet last week against Louisville. I think their hype can kind of get put to bed. That's not a team that's going to go back to the ACC title game. And Virginia is at home in this one, plus 7.5. They're getting a touchdown. I think there's a chance that they can win this game, but I definitely think they can keep it within the number. But I won't be surprised when we wake up Sunday morning and see UVA with a win over Louisville. So that's my dog of the day, plus 7.5 there.
My dog of the day, Coyle, is West Virginia. I'm taking them plus the 3 points. Just a really tough, night game. Iowa State going to Morgantown. Big spot for West Virginia. They lose this game. They got embarrassed against Penn State. They really, really need to win. Big rivalry loss against Pitt as well. So I'm going to go with the Mountaineers plus 3 at home, kind of a last stand type of game. Because you lose this game, you really – are having a completely different season than what you thought down in Morgantown. So I will take the Mountaineers plus the 3 points at home. 8 o'clock on Fox. This will probably be the third game I have on. Maybe it's a lie. Fourth game probably. I'll probably get a fourth TV at some point. Put that on as well.
All right, and then we go to lock of the week. Kind of talked about this already in the Florida-Tennessee breakdown, but I'll give another angle of a bet. I'm going with Tennessee minus 7.5 in the first half against Florida. Josh Heupel is the best first half against the spread coach in college football history. He comes out and he puts the foot on the gas from the beginning. At least that's what he used to do. I'm hoping that after that Arkansas last week, he comes back and kind of reverts to himself. And this is a Tennessee team that goes out and scores 40-plus points this week. Really, from the start, kind of lets this Florida team have it. Avenge that loss that they had to them last year and avenge that loss to the Razorbacks last weekend. Nico has his best game of the season. The rushing game goes wild as well, and I think Tennessee gets up early, and is up by 2 touchdowns at least by halftime in this one.
Yeah, Coyle, that's a great play. Personally, I think Tennessee is going to. We talked about it already. I think they're going to roll. My lock of the week, Coyle. You briefly mentioned, earlier how it's a lot tougher going west to east, playing a noon kickoff. East Coast, it's 9 a.m. local time. That is why I'm taking Iowa minus 2.5 against Washington. You're Washington. You're on top of the world. You just beat Michigan in the title game rematch, even though so many guys transferred out, all that stuff. But you still got a massive win against a big-time program in Michigan. Now you got to go to Iowa at 9 a.m. your time, 11 a.m., in Iowa. That's just a really tough turnaround. I love Iowa minus 2.5, especially with that defense. Iowa coming off a loss, coming home. I also had Pitt minus 2.5 as an honorable mention. I will at least shout that out. Hosting Cal, similar type of boat, big game, but they lost, and it's tough how they lost that game, blowing that lead. It's just going to be really tough to rally and go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I think that'll be like a noon local time kick, but still just a really tough spot there for the Golden Bears. But Iowa is my official pick, but I'm also shouting out Pitt minus 2.5 as well.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're gonna have to keep tabs on as the season goes on. These kind of body clock games with the realignment. I know they're gonna try and avoid these circumstances as much as possible, but you can't really. Like a few weeks ago when Washington flew out to Rutgers, they play that game at 8 o'clock on a Friday night instead of noon on a Saturday. It kind of benefits the road team in that scenario. But that's something I think definitely to keep an eye on with this realignment and these crazy time zone differences. So that'll be something to monitor for the rest of the year. It's something certainly I think we'll be talking about going forward. But Joe, enjoy Holy Grail week. I'm excited to finally get this out all out on the table. What we've been waiting for, see it. And then next week you have Georgia versus Texas, Tennessee versus Alabama. Those are the headliner games. I haven't looked into much of the others yet, but conference play is here. It's in full swing, and keep going from here. But as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and let's go Padres or Dodgers.